The courtroom went silent the moment a small boy stepped up to the podium and lied to a judge. Eli Navarro was only 10 years old, his hoodie too big, his sneakers worn thin, his voice barely above a whisper as he looked straight at Judge Frank Caprio and said, "It was me. I parked the car. Punish me, not my dad." In the second row, his father, Daniel, froze like a man watching a train wreck in slow motion. Everyone knew it couldn't be true, but why would a child throw himself in front of the consequences like that? What happened next would tear open the secret behind that lie, test the limits of a father's pride and a son's loyalty, and push one judge to choose between the cold letter of the law and the beating heart of justice. Before we dive in, tell us in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is right now, and if stories like this move you, hit subscribe so you don't miss what happens at the end of this case. Eli Navarro had never been inside a courtroom before that morning, yet he walked in with the kind of determination usually seen in people much older, people who have already tasted the bitterness of responsibility. His small hand clung to a wrinkled envelope. Inside it, the parking ticket that had become the invisible weight crushing his family for the past 2 months. Daniel, his father, stayed a step behind him, shoulders hunched as though trying to shrink himself out of existence. He looked like a man built from exhaustion. Faded jeans, a work shirt still smelling faintly of disinfectant from last night's shift, and eyes that had forgotten how to rest. The courtroom wasn't busy that morning. A couple of college kids whispering by the back wall, a tired-looking delivery driver clutching a citation, an elderly man with a cane. They all seemed frozen as Eli approached the podium, too small for the microphone, too brave for what he was about to do. Judge Caprio glanced up from his papers and immediately noticed something unusual. "Young man," he said, adjusting his glasses, "this seat is normally reserved for adults. What's your name?" "My name is Eli Navarro, Your Honor." His voice quivered but didn't break. "And how old are you, Eli?" 10, sir." "I meant in, Your Honor." There was a soft chuckle from one corner of the room, but it died fast when people saw the seriousness etched into the boy's face. "And why?" Judge Caprio continued gently. "Are you standing here with your father today?" Eli inhaled sharply, then launched into his rehearsed confession. "Because I'm the one who parked the car in that handicapped spot. Not my dad. I'm responsible for the ticket." Daniel's head jerked up as though someone had slapped him. Judge Caprio held up a hand. "Mr. Navarro, I'll speak with you in a moment." But Eli didn't flinch. He kept going, piling lie upon lie, each one more fragile than the last. "Two was the one who moved the car. My dad didn't know. I just wanted to help. I messed up." The words came out stiffly, memorized, but the emotion behind them was real. You could feel it like a tremor in the air. Narrator-like, you could almost hear someone whisper. What kind of 10-year-old decides to take the fall for a parking violation? What kind of pressure forces a child into a lie so heavy it bends his entire posture? Judge Caprio leaned back slightly, studying the boy with a mix of curiosity and concern. Over decades on the bench, he had learned to read more than testimony. He read faces, tremors, hesitations, the way someone breathed before answering. And right now, everything about Eli screamed one thing. He is protecting someone. "Tell me something, Eli," the judge said softly. "How tall are you?" 4'6", Your Honor. "And can you reach the pedals in your father's car?" Eli froze for a fraction of a second. It was subtle, but not invisible. "Yes, sir. I've practiced." A ripple of disbelief moved through the courtroom. The delivery driver actually muttered, "Come on," under his breath, but Eli pressed on. He clutched the podium as though anchoring himself against a storm. The judge flipped through the case file. This ticket was issued at 1:55 p.m. on a school day. "Were you in school that day?" "I was sick," Eli whispered. "Stayed home." "And you were sick but still decided to drive a car." "I was feeling better," he murmured. The crack in his story widened. Even a 10-year-old could hear the inconsistency. His father covered his face with one hand. Judge Caprio didn't raise his voice, didn't scold, didn't push. Instead, he leaned forward with a grandfather's gentleness. Eli, you understand that we only tell the truth in this courtroom, yes? The boy nodded. And you're telling me the truth right now? Another nod. Smaller this time. In the silence that followed, people witnessed a war inside Eli's chest. Fear, love, loyalty, desperation. His legs trembled. His fingers tightened until the tips turned white. This wasn't a child trying to escape punishment. This was a child trying to save someone else from it. Judge Caprio finally shifted his attention to Daniel. Mr. Navarro, where were you on the afternoon of January 14th when this ticket was issued? Daniel hesitated long enough for everyone to know the truth before he said it. His voice, when it finally emerged, was rough. I was on Riverside Avenue, Your Honor. I parked the car there. Eli shot him a panicked look. Dad, no. Eli, Daniel murmured. Enough. The judge watched the exchange in silence, letting the truth unravel naturally. Mr. Navarro, why did your son come in here and claim responsibility? Daniel swallowed hard. His answer came out in pieces, each one sounding heavier than the last. Because he found the ticket. He knows we're behind on rent. He knows I've been picking up double shifts. He overheard his mother crying last week because we couldn't pay the utility bill. Eli's face crumpled. He tried blinking the tears back, but they fell anyway. I just wanted to help, he choked. I thought if they punished me instead, maybe it wouldn't be so bad. Kids don't get big fines, right? The whole courtroom seemed to inhale at the same time. Daniel reached for his son's shoulder. Eli, buddy, you can't do that. That's not your burden. But the boy protested through tears. It is my burden. I live there too. I see what you go through. You barely sleep. Mom barely eats. You both pretend everything's okay, but nothing is okay. His voice shattered on that last word, and someone in the courtroom quietly sniffled. A college girl wiped her eyes. The delivery driver stared at the floor, jaw clenched. Judge Caprio exhaled slowly, not frustrated, but moved, deeply moved. He rose from the bench. That alone shifted the energy in the room. Judges don't stand during minor cases unless something extraordinary is happening. He walked around the bench and stopped right in front of Eli. The boy looked up at him, still shaking. Eli, he said softly, what you tried to do today is one of the most loyal, most loving things I've ever seen in this courtroom. The boy's lips parted, confused. But it was also wrong, the judge continued gently. Not because you meant harm, but because you tried to carry a weight that was never meant for your shoulders. Children shouldn't have to solve adult problems. That's not your job. Daniel lowered his head, tears escaping despite his efforts to stay composed. And Mr. Navarro, the judge said, turning to him, your son loves you so fiercely that he was willing to risk everything for you. That kind of love doesn't grow out of nowhere. It comes from the kind of father you've been. Daniel's breath hitched. The judge looked back at Eli. But I need you to hear something important. No matter how much you love your father, and I can see you love him deeply, fleeing in court isn't the way to protect him. The truth always finds its way to the surface, always. Eli nodded through tears. And you, the judge said tenderly, placing a hand on the boy's shoulder, have a heart that deserves to grow without fear. You shouldn't be worrying about rent, or bills, or parking tickets. You deserve to be 10 years old. Eli let out a sound halfway between a sob and a sigh. The courtroom remained silent, not out of obligation, but reverence. Something rare, something human, something profoundly real was unfolding, and it was only the beginning. The truth now hung in the room like a fragile lantern, glowing, trembling, impossible to ignore, but exposing the lie was only the beginning. Judge Caprio stepped back, folded his hands behind him, and regarded Eli with the kind of gaze that could see straight through the armor even grown men tried to hide behind. Eli, he said gently, I'm going to ask you a few more questions. Not to punish you, not to embarrass you, but because I need to understand why a 10-year-old felt he had no choice but to stand where adults stand. Can you do that for me? Eli nodded, wiping his face on the sleeve of his hoodie. Good, the judge replied. Now tell me, before today, have you ever driven a car? Eli licked his lips anxiously. No, Your Honor. You ever sit in the driver's seat? Only when the car wasn't moving. Dad let me pretend once, not really driving. And you told me earlier that you knew how to reach the pedals? Eli's shoulders drooped. I said that because I didn't want you to doubt me. Somewhere in the back, a woman sighed a soft, aching sound. Daniel closed his eyes, shame rippling across his face. So you were trying to make the lie believable? The judge asked. Yes, Eli whispered. I thought if I made it sound real, you'd believe me. Then Dad wouldn't get in trouble. The judge nodded slowly, absorbing the boy's confession without an ounce of anger. And why were you worried about your father getting in trouble? Eli hesitated. For the first time, it wasn't because he was lying. It was because he was telling the truth, a painful one. Because he already has too much, Eli said. He works all day. He comes home late. He gets up early. Sometimes he doesn't eat so the rest of us can. Sometimes he looks tired in a way that scares me. Daniel's breath caught, and he pressed a trembling hand to his forehead. Eli continued, voice cracking. And Mom cries a lot. At night. In the kitchen. She thinks nobody hears, but I do. She tries to hide it, but the walls are thin. People in the courtroom shifted uncomfortably, not from impatience, but from the kind of discomfort that comes when a child speaks truths. Adults wish he didn't know. The judge softened further. And you thought taking the blame would help? Yes, Eli whispered. A ticket for a kid can't be that bad, right? Maybe a small fine, maybe just a warning. His voice trembled. I thought it was the one thing I could do to help them. The judge paused, and for a long moment, he simply looked at the boy, really looked at him, the smeared tears on his cheeks, the trembling chin, the strength and fear all tangled together in a heartbreaking knot. Finally, he turned to Daniel. Mr. Navarro, your son's carrying worries that no 10-year-old should carry. Why do you think he feels responsible for holding your family together? Daniel swallowed, but the words wouldn't come. His voice cracked on the first attempt. Your Honor, I've tried so hard to hide it from them. The struggles, the late notices, the shifts I begged for. I thought I was protecting them. But I guess, his voice fell into a whisper, I guess I wasn't. The judge approached him. Children know more than we think. They hear the whispers. They feel the tension. They see what we try to hide. Daniel nodded, tears finally slipping free. I failed him, Your Honor. I failed both of us. But the judge shook his head firmly. No, you're a father doing his best. You made a mistake parking in a handicapped spot, but you didn't fail your son. Look at him. Daniel did. Eli stood small and shaky, but his eyes radiated love fierce enough to break through poverty, fear, exhaustion, secrets. That love, the judge continued, doesn't grow from failure. It grows from the way you've raised him. The room exhaled collectively, but Judge Caprio wasn't done. He returned to the podium, resting both hands on its edge. Eli, I want you to tell me something. When you woke up this morning, did you plan to take the blame? Eli nodded. I thought about it all weekend. I told Dad in the parking lot, but he said no. He told me not to do it, but I did it anyway. Why? Because he wasn't going to ask for help, Eli said, voice trembling but sure. He never asks. And I knew if I didn't say it first, he'd just take whatever punishment came. You decided to protect him. Yes, Your Honor. He protects us all the time, I thought. Maybe I could do one thing back. The judge let the silence settle. It was an empty silence like this never was. It was full of awe, sorrow, admiration, and the raw truth of a child carrying burdens too large for his frame. Finally, the judge leaned closer to Eli. Do you know what happens when someone lies in court? Eli's voice shrank. They get in trouble. Yes, they do. Sometimes big trouble. Eli's hands curled into fists at his sides, bracing himself. "But that's not going to happen today," the judge said, his voice gentle as a hand on a trembling shoulder. "Because I understand why you did it. But I need you to understand something too. Protecting someone you love never requires dishonesty. Real protection comes from truth." Eli nodded, wiping new tears. "You're brave," the judge said, "but bravery isn't about taking blame. It's about facing the truth even when it hurts." For the first time, Eli's shoulders loosened. The weight he had carried in with him seemed to leak out through his tears. The judge turned to Daniel. "Mr. Navarro, this fine started at $150. After penalties for late payment, it's now $310. That's no small sum for a family in your circumstances." Daniel nodded miserably. "Yes, Your Honor." Ture was trying to figure out how to pay it. The judge looked between father and son. "And you didn't ask for assistance?" "I didn't want to take resources from someone who needed it more," Daniel murmured. The judge gave him a long, thoughtful look, not judgmental considering, understanding. Then he turned back to Eli. "Tell me something honest, Eli. When you think of your dad, what do you see?" Eli's answer came without hesitation. "I see a hero." Daniel's face twisted in anguish. He looked away, overwhelmed. The judge nodded. "I thought so." He took a deep breath, an inhale that signaled something important was about to happen. The courtroom leaned in. "Eli," he said softly, "I want you to come closer." Eli stepped forward. The judge crouched slightly, lowering himself to the boy's eye level with deliberate tenderness. "Look at me," he said. Eli did. "You are not responsible for your family's burdens. You are not responsible for adult mistakes. And you are not responsible for fixing things beyond your reach. Your job is to grow, to learn, to be a child with dreams that soar higher than these worries you've been carrying." Eli's lips trembled again, but this time, something like relief flickered behind the pain. "And your father," the judge continued, turning to Daniel, "is responsible for leading this family, not through silence or struggle alone, but by showing them what honesty and humility look like." Daniel nodded, tears flowing freely now. "What we're going to do next," the judge said, rising to full height, "is going to depend on the truth, not the lie we heard earlier." The tension in the room sharpened. Eli swallowed. Daniel tensed. Everyone held their breath. Because in the next few moments, Judge Frank Caprio was about to reach a decision that neither father nor son could possibly expect. One that would alter not just the outcome of a parking violation, but the trajectory of an entire family's future. The silence in the courtroom settled like dust after an earthquake, soft, quiet, and revealing the wreckage underneath. Eli stood trembling at the podium, the lie he had clutched so fiercely now, crumbling into truth at his feet. Daniel stood behind him, hollowed by shame, yet overflowing with love, unable to reconcile the image of his brave son with the reality of what had just happened. Judge Caprio moved slowly back toward the bench, but he didn't sit. Instead, he rested his hands atop the wooden surface, as if grounding himself before continuing. His eyes moved between father and son, measuring, discerning, understanding things they hadn't said aloud. "Mr. Navarro," he began, "I want you to tell me, clearly and without hesitation, why did you park in that handicapped spot?" Daniel took a shaky breath. "Your Honor, I was in a rush. I just finished a shift caring for a client on the second floor of an apartment building. I had 15 minutes to drive across town for my next appointment. My client is 89 years old, dementia, diabetes. She can't be left alone long. I was terrified of being late." He looked down, shame radiating off him. "I made a choice. A bad one. I told myself it was only for a few minutes. Was there any other reason?" Daniel hesitated. "Yes. My legs were hurting. I've been taking double shifts for weeks, and that day, it felt like I couldn't take one more step. But I didn't want my client to know. She worries too much already." The judge's gaze softened. Exhaustion was a language he spoke fluently. "So you parked illegally to protect your client and to keep your job?" Daniel nodded. Yes, Your Honor. And the ticket? I didn't have the money. I thought maybe next paycheck. Then the next. And the fees kept adding up. The courtroom absorbed the confession with a kind of collective ache. There was nothing glamorous or wild about Daniel's mistake. It was the kind of mistake made by a man who was drowning quietly, unnoticed, trying to stay afloat for the sake of everyone but himself. And your son, the judge continued, turning his attention to Eli, took it upon himself to carry the consequences for you. Eli looked at the floor. I wanted to help, he whispered. The judge exhaled long and slow, as though steadying his emotions. Before I go any further, I need to ask you something important, Eli. The boy looked up. Do you think your father is a bad man? Eli shook his head vigorously. No, never. Do you think he deserves to be punished? Again, a quick shake of the head. He works harder than anyone. He helps people every day. He barely sleeps. He always puts us first. The judge nodded, digesting the answer. And because you think he's a good man, you tried to lie for him. Eli hesitated, but then he nodded. Yes, because good people shouldn't be punished for just trying to take care of their family. The judge tilted his head slightly. Is that what you think punishment is for? To hurt people. To make their lives worse. Eli blinked, unsure. Isn't it? No, the judge said, his voice carrying a weight that silenced even the shuffling feet in the gallery. Punishment exists to correct wrongdoing, to guide, to teach, not to destroy. He stepped away from the bench again, slowly walking toward Eli like a grandfather approaching a wounded child. Let me tell you something, Eli, he said softly. Good people make mistakes. Good fathers make mistakes. Good sons make mistakes. But lying to cover those mistakes only digs the hole deeper. Eli's lip trembled, though he tried hard to steady it. And when you lie to protect someone you love, the judge continued, you're putting a burden on your heart that you're too young to carry. You're teaching yourself that love means hurting yourself. That's not true. Real love is rooted in truth. Eli looked up at him, tears forming again. But what if telling the truth hurts someone you love? He asked in a small, shaking voice. Judge Caprio knelt slightly so they were level, the black robe pooling around him like a soft cloud. Truth doesn't hurt people, Eli, he said. Circumstances do. Poverty does. Overwork does. Desperation does. But truth frees people, even when it's hard. The boy didn't answer, but his shoulders rose and fell in a small emotional shudder. The judge stood again, now turning fully to Daniel. Mr. Navarro, your son's fear tells me something important. He doesn't believe you feel safe. He thinks one more hardship will break you. Daniel's breath hitched in his throat. Your Honor, I never wanted him to feel that way. But he does, the judge said, his tone gentle but firm. And that means something needs to change. Daniel nodded, unable to speak. You've been carrying too much, the judge continued, alone, silently, trying to shield your family from the truth. But by hiding the struggle, you made your son feel responsible for fixing it. Daniel covered his mouth with one hand. His shoulders shook. I didn't know, he whispered through tears. I didn't know he felt all that. I thought I was protecting him. By protecting him from the truth, the judge said softly, you made him believe he had to protect you instead. That moment landed with the emotional force of a tidal wave. Eli turned toward his father. Daniel instinctively placed a shaking hand on his son's back. I'm sorry, Dad, Eli whispered. No, Daniel said immediately, pulling him close. No, buddy. I'm the one who's sorry. You should never have felt like you had to do this. Eli buried his face in his father's shirt. Daniel held him like a man clinging to the last dry piece of land in a storm. For several seconds, the courtroom was silent, except for the soft, unsteady breaths of father and son, reconnecting under the judge's watchful eye. Then Judge Caprio cleared his throat, not to break the moment, but to guide it. Mr. Navarro, he said, How much do you currently owe on the ticket? Daniel straightened slightly, though the answer weighed heavily. $310, Your Honor. And if you had to pay that today? Daniel looked at Eli, then back at the judge. We wouldn't make rent this month. Or utilities. No, Your Honor. A long pause. And your son knows that? Daniel nodded weakly. Yes. He overheard us. That, right there, was the turning point. The fulcrum. The place where emotion, justice, and responsibility intertwined in a way only a handful of judges in the world could navigate with compassion instead of cruelty. Judge Caprio took a deep, deliberate breath. Eli, he said, turning back to the boy, I want you to listen carefully. What you did today, while misguided, came from the purest place inside you. You were trying to save your family. A child shouldn't have to think that way, but you did. And that tells me your heart is enormous. Eli sniffed. But that doesn't mean you have to carry this burden. Adults made this mistake. Adults will handle it. Eli nodded shakily. And that's why, the judge continued, the consequences will not fall on you. He turned back to Daniel. But they also won't fall the way you expect. Daniel blinked in confusion. Mr. Navarro, the judge said, you made an error. You parked where you shouldn't have, but the punishment is not meant to crush you. It's meant to correct. And in this case, he paused. Even Eli held his breath. The correction has already happened. Daniel frowned. Sue don't understand, Your Honor. You understand perfectly, the judge said. Look at your son. Look at what today taught him. He learned honesty. He learned boundaries. He learned that carrying your burdens isn't his job. Daniel swallowed. And you, the judge added, learned that you can't hide the struggle. Not from him. Not anymore. The judge stepped back toward the bench. I'm not here to bury struggling families. I'm here to guide them. He picked up the ticket file, tapped it once, then set it down. The fine is dismissed. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Daniel's knees buckled. He steadied himself on the bench. Eli stared, wide-eyed. It's gone. All gone, the judge said warmly. Daniel covered his mouth with both hands. Your Honor, I don't know how to thank you. You thank me, the judge said, by being honest with your son, by letting him be a child, by letting him grow without carrying your burdens. Eli threw his arms around his father. Daniel embraced him fiercely, forehead pressed to his son's hair. But the judge lifted one finger. However, we're not finished. Father and son looked up at him. Good outcomes require good lessons, he said. And I have one more lesson in mind for both of you. Nobody knew it yet, but what Judge Caprio was about to propose would ripple far beyond that courtroom, changing not just a single day, but the course of an entire family's future. Judge Caprio let the silence breathe for a few seconds, giving Daniel and Eli time to absorb what had just happened. The dismissal of the fine was monumental, life-changing. But the judge's tone made it clear there was more to come. Not a punishment, not exactly. Something different. Something deeper. He rested both palms on the bench and leaned forward slightly. Now, before you think this is over, there's something we need to settle. A matter of responsibility. Not legal responsibility, moral responsibility. Daniel straightened, still holding Eli protectively. Your Honor, whatever lesson you think I need, I'll take it. But please go easy on my son. It was my mistake. The judge gave him a reassuring nod. I've already decided your son's lesson, and you'll find it has nothing to do with punishment. Eli blinked, confused. Judge Caprio moved around the bench again, something he rarely did twice, in one case, stopping in front of the podium where Eli stood. Eli, he said softly, you showed bravery today. Misguided, yes, but real. You showed love. You showed loyalty. You showed courage that many adults don't have, but courage needs guidance, so I'm going to give you a mission. A mission? Eli asked, almost whispering. A mission, the judge repeated with a gentle smile. 30 days. Starting today, you will keep a kindness journal. Every day you must write down one thing you did that helped someone else, something true, something real, something kind. It doesn't have to be big. It just has to be honest. Eli blinked again. The request was so unexpected that even Daniel looked stunned. The judge continued, "This will remind you that honesty, not sacrifice, is how you help people. That small, truthful kindnesses change far more lives than big, dangerous lies. Do you understand?" Eli nodded slowly. "Yes, Your Honor, and I want you to bring that journal back to me in 30 days. I want to see what kind of young man you're becoming." Eli's eyes widened. The idea that the judge wanted to see his writing filled him with a mixture of excitement and responsibility he'd never felt before. "Can you do that?" "Yes," Eli said, a little stronger this time. "I can." "Good." The judge turned to Daniel now. "As for you, Mr. Navarro, your lesson is different." Daniel braced himself. "Your son tried to carry your burdens because he believed you had no support. So I want you to show him and show yourself that accepting help is not a failure. It's an act of courage." Daniel frowned. "Help, Your Honor." "Yes," the judge said. "Financial help, community help, emotional help. You've been drowning quietly. And drowning men don't just need strength, they need lifelines." Daniel lowered his head. "I've never wanted charity." The judge shook his head. "This isn't charity. This is connection. I'm going to refer your family to a local community assistance office. They can help with rent stabilization, food support, and job placements. Whether you accept the help is up to you, but I strongly recommend it." Daniel swallowed hard, visibly conflicted. "It feels like I'm failing." "No," the judge said firmly. "Failing is refusing help when you need it. Failing is letting your son believe he must lie for you. Failing is trying to be unbreakable until you shatter." Daniel exhaled shakily, as though someone had just read aloud his private fears. "You're a good father," the judge added, softer now. "A good man. Good men need support too." Eli squeezed his father's hand. "Dad, it's okay. You don't have to do everything alone." Something broke inside Daniel, not in a painful way, but in a freeing way. The kind of breaking that lets a wound finally breathe. A long moment passed. Then the judge stepped back, addressing both of them. "This case is dismissed. But the lesson continues. I expect both of you to follow through with what we discussed. Not because I'm ordering you to, but because your family deserves the chance to heal." Father and son nodded together. But the judge wasn't done, not quite. He turned to Eli again. "There's one more thing. Something you need to hear." Eli looked up, eyes still glassy from emotion. "You're not responsible for saving your family," the judge said, "but you're part of it. That means you matter. Your thoughts matter, your feelings matter, and your voice matters. So talk to your parents. Tell them when you're scared. Let them tell you when they're struggling. Families don't survive by hiding things from each other. They survive by carrying the truth together." Eli nodded with a depth that didn't belong to a 10-year-old. "I understand." "I know you do," the judge said, smiling softly. "You're a remarkable young man." Around the courtroom, people subtly wiped their eyes. A few sniffled. The delivery driver muttered, "This judge man, he's different." Eli stepped back toward his father, and Daniel immediately wrapped an arm around his shoulders. The two of them stood taller, not because their burdens were gone, but because the weight was finally shifted into a place they could share. The judge made his way back to the bench, preparing to conclude the case. But something in him paused. He looked down at his papers, then back up at the family. A thought flickered behind his eyes, one he hadn't planned on sharing. "Mr. Navarro," he said suddenly, "do you mind if I tell you something personal?" Daniel blinked in surprise. "Of course not, Your Honor. When I was a boy," the judge said, "my father worked 3 jobs. He was an immigrant. Money was tight, very tight, and he tried to shield us from it. He wanted us to feel safe." Eli listened, wide-eyed, but we felt it anyway. Kids always do. And what I learned, years later, is that silence doesn't protect children. Honesty does. Daniel absorbed every word. "So don't hide the struggle," the judge said. "Let your son see the truth. Not to burden him, but to teach him how families face hardship together." Daniel nodded slowly. "I will, Your Honor." The judge smiled. "Good." The clerk cleared her throat gently, signaling that other cases were waiting. But even she didn't want to rush this moment. "Before you go," the judge said, looking back at Eli, "I want you to remember something. A lie told out of love is still a lie. But love itself, love is always true. And you, Eli, you have more love in you than most people twice your age." Eli's cheeks flushed, but he stood a little taller. "Go home," the judge finished. "Be a family. Heal. And come back in 30 days with that journal." Daniel placed a hand on his son's back and gently guided him toward the exit. But as they reached the door, Eli turned around one last time. "Your Honor." "Yes, Eli. Thank you for seeing us." The judge's expression softened, not with pride, but with something deeper. Recognition, connection, humanity. "You're very welcome, young man," he said. "Now go, make me proud." As father and son stepped into the hallway, the doors swinging closed behind them, the courtroom felt transformed. People murmured among themselves, not out of gossip, but out of awe. They had come expecting citations, fines, numbers, rules. Instead, they witnessed something else entirely. They witnessed justice, the kind that doesn't just correct mistakes, but heals hearts. But what none of them knew, what even the judge didn't yet know, was that this simple case would ignite a chain reaction far beyond the courtroom. A ripple effect that would change the Navarros' lives, the judge's life, and eventually the lives of countless people who would hear this story. It was only the beginning. 3 days passed after the hearing, 3 days in which the Navarro apartment felt strangely lighter, as though the judge had not only dismissed a fine but opened a window that had long been sealed shut. Still, neither Daniel nor Eli fully grasped how much their lives were about to change. On the morning of the 4th day, their old apartment buzzer crackled, and a voice came through, gentle, unfamiliar, but purposeful. "Hello. I'm looking for the Navarro family." Daniel wiped his hands on his work pants and pressed the intercom. "Yes. Who's this?" "My name is Karen Lattimore. I work with Providence Community Outreach. May I come up? I promise this isn't bad news." Those words, "isn't bad news," were enough to make Daniel buzz her in immediately. A few seconds later, a woman in her late 30s, wearing a navy coat and carrying a clipboard, knocked gently on their door. She had the calm presence of someone who had spent years entering homes at difficult times and knowing exactly how to put people at ease. Daniel welcomed her in. The living room was small but clean, toys neatly stacked in a corner, a hand-me-down couch, barely enough space to turn around. But there was warmth, real warmth. "Mr. Navarro," she said with a polite nod, "Judge Caprio referred your family to us." Daniel blinked. He remembered. "Oh, yes," she replied. "He called personally. Said your case needed follow-up. Said your family deserved some extra help." Daniel swallowed. Gratitude mixed with embarrassment. I don't want to take advantage of anything. We're managing." Karen smiled in a way that made it impossible to hide anything. "Your son took the blame for your ticket," she said softly. "Mr. Navarro, families who are truly managing don't have children doing that." Daniel's eyes flicked toward the hallway, where Eli was listening from behind the wall even though he thought he was being subtle. Karen lowered her clipboard. "Let's start with the immediate concerns. I understand you're behind on rent. Caught. Exposed." Yet Daniel didn't feel judged, just seen. "Yes," he admitted. 2 months. Utilities. A few weeks. How many hours are you working?" "Between 70 and 80 a week, sometimes more." She exhaled quietly. "That isn't survival, Mr. Navarro. That's burnout." Daniel's shoulders slumped. "I didn't want to ask for help. But help asked for you," she said gently. "And the program we run isn't charity. It's stabilization. For working families who just need a bridge. Then she surprised him. Your son, he's extraordinary. Daniel looked down. He's too mature for his age. He carries too much. That's exactly why we're here. To lighten that load. She laid out a plan. 2 months of rent coverage, utility assistance, a caseworker to help them apply for benefits they never knew they qualified for, a job placement specialist for Daniel's wife, Mary Saul, free food vouchers once a week, financial counseling, transportation help. It was overwhelming. Daniel rubbed his eyes, trying to hide the tears pooling there. I don't know what to say, he whispered. Say yes, Karen replied softly. Say yes for your son. Say yes so he never feels like he has to lie in a courtroom again. Daniel nodded slowly. Then yes. Yes, we accept the help. From behind the hallway wall, Eli exhaled a sigh of relief that he didn't fully understand, but felt down to his bones. The next change began that same week, though the Navarros didn't see it coming. On social media, the courtroom video began circulating. It started small, shared by a Providence community page, then by a teacher, then by a local journalist. Within 48 hours, it hit 1 million views. People were struck not by the fine, not by the legal issue, but by the moment a 10-year-old boy said, "Punish me, not my dad," and the judge who answered him with compassion instead of condemnation. The video reached a local restaurant owner, a middle-aged man named Tony Donato, who ran Donato's Deli 5 blocks from where Daniel worked. Tony watched the clip twice, then 3 times. His father had been a single parent. He remembered what it was like to struggle, to hide overdue bills, to pretend things were fine when they weren't. He called over one of his employees. See this family? You find out how to reach them. I want to help. Meanwhile, Eli began his kindness journal exactly as the judge had asked. The first entry was uncertain. Day 1. I helped my brother with his homework. Not because Mom told me to, because I wanted to. Day 2. I wrote a thank you note to my teacher. She said she needed it today. I didn't know, but she said it helped. Day 3. I gave my friend Mateo my extra sandwich. He said he was fine, but he wasn't. The entries became more confident, more thoughtful. Day 6. I helped an older woman carry her groceries up the stairs. She said she misses her son. I didn't know what to say, so I just listened. Day 8. My sister was scared to sleep because she had nightmares. I sat with her until she fell asleep. Eli didn't know it yet, but he wasn't just doing the assignment, he was changing. Daniel saw it. His wife saw it. Even his teacher, Mrs. Gannon, saw it. She wrote an email to Daniel. Something is different about Eli. He's lighter, more focused, happier. Whatever happened in that courtroom, it changed him. 1 week later, on a windy Thursday afternoon, there was another knock at the Navarro door. This time, when Daniel opened it, he found a smiling man with sandy hair, holding a bag of food and an envelope. Mr. Navarro, I'm Tony. I run Donato's Deli. Mind if I come in for a second? Daniel was confused. Sure. Tony stepped inside, looking around as if taking a quiet inventory of the home without judgment. I saw the video, he said. Your son, he's something special. And you're a good man doing your best. I know what that looks like. Daniel swallowed. We're trying. Trying isn't failing, Tony replied. Then he handed Daniel the envelope. This is a voucher, good for 3 free meals a week at my deli for the next 6 months. No strings. Daniel nearly buckled. I can't accept this. You can, Tony insisted, and you will. I've been hungry before. No kid should go to bed with an empty stomach because his dad is too proud. Daniel blinked back tears. Thank you. I don't know what to say. Say you'll come by tomorrow, Tony said with a grin. I make a mean chicken parm. Eli peeked from the hallway. Tony noticed and winked. And I make desserts for brave kids. Eli blushed but smiled, real unburdened smile. But the biggest change came 2 weeks later. Daniel received a call from a number he didn't recognize. He answered cautiously. Hello? Mr. Navarro, this is Samuel Ortiz, hiring coordinator for the Providence Home Health Network. We saw your name come through a professional referral from Judge Frank Caprio. Daniel sat down immediately. The judge recommended me? Yes, and we'd like to interview you for a senior caregiver position. Full-time, higher pay, benefits, you come highly respected. Daniel covered his mouth, overwhelmed. Are you available Monday morning? The man asked. Yes, Daniel said instantly, even though he had no idea how he'd rearrange his schedule. Yes, absolutely. We'll see you then. When he hung up, he looked at Ellie, who was sitting on the couch doing homework, and whispered, Son, things are changing. Eli grinned. Because of the judge? Daniel shook his head gently. Because of you, too. Word of the video spread even further. A local nonprofit reached out with scholarship opportunities for Eli's future education. A community center offered after-school programs for the Navarro children at no cost. A church group anonymously delivered grocery bags to their doorstep. But the most profound change happened inside the home. Daniel talked, more really talked. He told Eli when he felt tired, when he felt overwhelmed, when he wasn't sure what to do. And Eli, for the first time in his life, realized that helping didn't mean lying or protecting. It meant listening, being present, being honest. Marisol, Daniel's wife, felt it too. The emotional weight she had been hiding for months suddenly had room to breathe. She began applying for jobs again, seriously this time, with support. The Navarros began to heal, not because their struggle vanished, but because it was finally shared, carried, spoken. And as the 30-day mark approached, Eli's kindness journal thickened with meaningsome pages filled with shaky handwriting, others with drawings, some with reflections longer than any teacher had ever required. Yet the biggest entry, the one that would shape the next chapter, hadn't been written yet. It would come later, after something unexpected, something that would make Eli realize just how far the ripples of one courtroom morning could reach. Something that would take the Navarros back to the one place they least expected but most needed to return to. Judge Frank Caprio's courtroom. 30 days passed faster than anyone expected. Spring crept into Providence with shy sunlight and the faint smell of wet pavement. The Navarro apartment, once suffocating with unspoken fear, now hummed with quiet warmth and newfound stability. But beneath the surface of those small daily victories, Eli carried a growing anticipation and eagerness mixed with nervousness. He was going back to court. Not as a defendant, not as a liar trying to save his father, but as a boy with a journal full of truth. The night before the appointment with Judge Caprio, Eli couldn't sleep. He sat at the small kitchen table, the kindness journal open in front of him. He flipped through the pages, some neat, some messy, some stained with hurried pencil smudges. On one page, he had drawn a stick-figure family holding hands. On another, he wrote a full paragraph about helping his teacher carry boxes after school. The last page was blank. He stared at it for a long time. Then Daniel came out of the bedroom, rubbing sleep from his eyes. You're still awake? Eli shrugged. I want it to be good. I want the judge to be proud. Daniel pulled out the chair beside him. The overhead light flickered softly. Eli, you don't have to impress him. You already have. Just be honest. That's all he ever asked of you. Eli nodded, though the pressure still settled heavy in his chest. And, Daniel added, placing a hand on his son's shoulder, I'm proud, whether you write that last page or not. The compliment landed with a weight Eli didn't know he needed. He leaned his head briefly against his father's arm before sitting up straight again. I know what I want to write now, he whispered. The next morning, the Navarros returned to the courthouse. It felt surreal walking through the same glass doors this time without dread, without debt hanging over them. The fluorescent lights still buzzed overhead. The benches still creaked. The clerk still shuffled papers with practiced monotony. But the air felt different. Lighter. Daniel held the door for Eli, who carried the kindness journal tucked carefully under his arm like a sacred book. "Do you think the judge will remember us?" Eli asked. Daniel smiled. "Son, I think there's no chance he forgot." Just then the courtroom doors opened, and a clerk gestured them in early. "He's expecting you," she said, smiling warmly. Inside, the room was empty except for Judge Frank Caprio, sitting at the bench with no robe this time, just a light gray sweater and glasses perched at the tip of his nose. He looked up and broke into a genuine smile. "Eli." "Mr. Navarro." Come in, come in." Eli beamed. The judge stood and motioned them closer. "I wanted to see you before court began today. I hear you've brought something for me." Eli nodded and held out the journal with two hands, like it was precious cargo. "For you, Your Honor." The judge accepted it reverently. "May I?" "Yes, Your Honor." He opened it slowly, scanning the entries. As he turned each page, his smile deepened. The more he read, the more his expression softened into something like pride, and something else hope. "Eli," he said, tapping one page lightly. "This one here. Helping your teacher clean up after class on a day she said she felt overwhelmed. That's an act of noticing, of seeing someone's pain." Eli nodded shyly. She looked really tired. "I didn't know how to help, so I just did what I could." The judge nodded approvingly. "Beautiful." He flipped a few more pages. "Ah, helping your little sister with nightmares. That is kindness with patience, often the hardest kind." Another page. Bringing lunch to a friend who pretended he wasn't hungry. That's kindness with empathy. Then he reached the last page, the one Eli had finished only hours earlier. There, in small handwriting, was a single sentence. Day 30. "I told my dad I don't want to carry his worries anymore, but I'll always share them with him." The judge's throat tightened visibly. He read the sentence twice, then a third time. Finally, he looked up at Daniel. This is healing. Right here." Daniel's eyes shimmered with tears. "We're trying, Your Honor." "You're doing more than trying," the judge replied. "You're transforming." Eli looked between them, unsure what to say. The judge closed the journal carefully and placed it on the bench like it was fragile. "Eli, I want to ask you something important. How did keeping this journal make you feel?" Eli hesitated, thinking. At first, it felt like homework, but then it started to feel like something else. "What's that?" "Like I was useful," Eli said, "not by lying or taking blame, but by doing real things, honest things." He looked at his hands. "I think I used to feel small because I couldn't fix the big problems. Keeping the journal made me realize little things matter." Judge Caprio's eyes warmed. "They matter more than you know." Then he gestured for Eli to step closer. "Now I have a question for you, young man. One more important than all the others. Do you still feel responsible for saving your family?" Eli swallowed. "No, not like before." "And why not?" "Because I don't need to save them," Eli said. "We can help each other instead." The judge's smile grew. "Exactly." He turned to Daniel next. "And what about you? What has this month taught you?" Daniel breathed deeply. "That I've been wrong about what strength means. I used to think strength was handling everything alone. But I see now, strength is letting people help you, especially your family." The judge nodded approvingly. "You've learned the hardest lesson of all." He leaned back for a moment as though savoring the transformation happening before him. Then something unexpected happened. "Eli," he said, "have you ever been inside a judge's chambers?" Eli's eyes widened. "No, Your Honor. Would you like to?" The boy nodded excitedly. "Follow me." They walked behind the bench, through a side door, and into the chambers, a cozy office lined with books, framed photos, and shelves of memorabilia from decades of service. Pictures of the judge's family filled the desk. A small American flag stood beside a globe. A plaque on the wall read, "Justice is not the punishment of wrongdoing, but the recognition of humanity." But what caught Eli's eye most was something on the middle shelf. A collection of journals, dozens of them, each labeled with a name and a year. The judge noticed where he was looking and smiled. Those are from young people I've met throughout my year, skids like you, kids who needed direction, support, or a little hope. I keep their journals because they remind me why this job matters. Eli stared in awe. Judge Caprio reached up, took Eli's kindness journal, and placed it on the shelf alongside the others. There, he said softly. Now your story sits here too. A reminder that kindness and honesty can grow even in the hardest places. Eli's chest swelled with pride. Daniel stood behind him, wiping a tear. Eli, the judge continued, I want to invite you to something. We have a summer internship program here at the courthouse for middle school students, usually for older kids, 12, 13, 14, but I think you're ready to begin early. Eli's jaw dropped. Me? Really? Yes, you, the judge said, only if you want to. You'll observe cases, help with paperwork, learn how justice works, not just the rules, but the heart behind them. Daniel's voice shook. Your Honor, this is incredible. I don't offer it lightly, the judge said, smiling. But I see potential in your son. And more importantly, he sees it in himself now. Eli nodded vigorously. I want to do it. I really want to. The judge extended his hand. Then it would be my honor to have you here this summer. Eli shook it, his small hand disappearing inside the judge's grasp. And in that moment, something shifted, something subtle but powerful. A new chapter began not just for Eli, but for the entire Navarro family. A chapter built not on fear, but on purpose. Not on burdens, but on growth. Not on secrecy, but on truth. Yet they had no idea that the summer ahead would be full of moments that tested Eli's empathy, sharpened his understanding of justice, and carved the early outlines of a future he had never imagined. A future shaped by the man standing before him, the judge who had seen beyond a lie and into the heart of a child. Eli's internship began on the first Tuesday of summer break, warm June morning, when the courthouse steps shimmered slightly under the early sun. He dressed with unusual seriousness, wearing a collared shirt that was slightly too big and khaki pants his mother had ironed twice. Daniel held his shoulders for a moment before they entered. You ready, champ? Eli nodded, though his nervousness fluttered just beneath the surface. Do you think the judge will really want me here? Daniel smiled. Son, if he didn't want you here, he wouldn't have invited you. Inside the courthouse, familiar scents of old paper, polished floors, and the faint hum of bureaucracy greeted them. But this time, the building felt different. Less intimidating, more like a new world Eli was being allowed to explore. The clerk at the front desk saw them and smiled warmly. Eli Navarro, Judge Caprio is expecting you. You can go right in. Eli hesitated for only half a second before walking straight through the double doors. Judge Caprio stood near his bench, not wearing his robe, yet just a light blue shirt with the sleeves rolled to the elbows. When he noticed Eli, his face lit up with genuine warmth. Ah, my young scholar, the judge said. Welcome to the heart of justice. Eli beamed. Daniel shook the judge's hand. Thank you again, Your Honor. This means everything. The pleasure is mine, the judge replied. Now go on, let the boy have his first day. Daniel left reluctantly, glancing back at least twice before the door closed. Eli stood alone now, clutching his notebook, unsure what came next. Judge Caprio placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. You're going to do fine, Eli. Just follow me. And then, for the first time, Eli walked behind the bench not as someone being judged, but as someone learning how judgment works. The judge took Eli through every corner of the courthouse, the clerk's office, where documents were stamped and sorted, the records room, which smelled like ink and decades of stories, the waiting area, where people fidgeted with anxiety or relief, depending on their luck. This building, the judge told him, doesn't run on laws alone. It runs on people. Eli nodded thoughtfully, By 9 a.m., the courtroom was full. Students, workers, upset grandparents, confused teenagers, exhausted single mothers, an anxious-looking taxi driver, even a man in a bright Hawaiian shirt who seemed utterly unbothered by whatever violation had dragged him in. Judge Caprio put on his robe. "Ready to observe?" he asked. "Yes, Your Honor," Eli said, puffing his chest slightly. "Good. Sit to my left today. Quietly. Watch everything." Eli climbed into the small chair beside the bench, his feet barely touching the floor. He opened his notebook and gripped his pencil ready. The first case was a man who'd run a red light at 5:17 a.m. The footage showed an empty street. No cars, no pedestrians. When the judge asked the man why he'd taken the risk, the man answered, "I was rushing to see my mother. She had a stroke. I wasn't thinking right." Eli expected punishment, but the judge said, "Your mother needed you. You were wrong, but your heart was in the right place. Case dismissed." Eli scribbled, "Justice sees people, not moments." The next case was a woman who had racked up 3 parking tickets outside the hospital where her son was receiving chemotherapy. She apologized so much Eli felt a tightening in his chest. The judge leaned forward and said gently, "Your son is the priority. I'm waiving the fines. Focus on him." Eli scribbled, "Justice lifts burdens." Hours passed like minutes. Eli watched carefully, not the violations, but the way the judge listened. The way he leaned in, made eye contact, allowed people to breathe. It was the first time Eli had ever seen that justice didn't always mean punishment. Sometimes justice meant mercy. But the most pivotal moment of the day came unexpectedly. A teenage boy, maybe 16, stepped up to the podium, shoulders rounded, hair falling over his face. He had been caught speeding in a school zone. The judge studied him silently for a moment. "What's your name?" the judge asked. "Jason," the boy muttered. "And why were you speeding near a school at 8 in the morning?" Jason hesitated. I was late." "For what?" Jason swallowed. "To take my little sister to daycare. My mom works mornings and my dad isn't around." "I overslept. I didn't want her to get kicked out." There was something familiar about the way he said it. That quiet desperation of a kid trying to carry too much. Eli recognized it instantly. Judge Caprio listened, nodding slowly. "Jason, do you understand how dangerous speeding in a school zone is?" "Yes, sir." "And do you understand that protecting your sister is noble, but risking lives isn't?" Jason nodded again. Eli watched the judge closely. He saw something in the judge's eyes, something heavy, thoughtful, worn with experience. Then the judge said something Eli didn't expect. "You remind me of another young boy who stood here recently. He tried to carry a weight that wasn't his. Just like you." Eli froze in his chair. Jason glanced up. "What happened to him?" The judge gestured subtly toward Eli. He learned that love doesn't excuse danger, and that honesty is worth more than sacrifice. Jason's eyes shifted toward Eli, who looked down, embarrassed but proud in a strange way. Then the judge delivered his decision. "I'm reducing your fine," he said. "But I want something in return. I want you to commit to being more careful. Your sister needs you. That means being alive, being safe, being responsible." Jason's shoulders loosened, relief flooding his face. "Yes, sir, I will." Eli scribbled, "Justice protects, even when correcting." When court adjourned for lunch, the judge turned to Eli. "Thoughts?" "It's like," Eli struggled for the right words, "it's like you look at the reasons, not just the rules." The judge smiled. "Exactly." They ate together in the judge's chambers, sandwiches, juice, and a small pack of crackers the judge kept in his desk drawer for emergencies. "You know," the judge said between bites, "you have something rare for someone your age." "What's that?" "A sense of others. You feel what people are feeling. You see what they hide." Eli looked down. "Is that good?" "It's a gift," the judge said, "but only if you learn to use it with honesty. Compassion without truth can become dangerous. Truth without compassion becomes cold." Justice is both. Eli let those words settle into him like seeds planted deep inside. As the summer progressed, Eli became part of the courthouse family. The clerks greeted him by name. Officers taught him how the ticketing system worked. One attorney even let him observe a full day of filings. He filled his notebook with observations, lessons, questions. One afternoon, after a particularly emotional case involving a struggling father, Eli asked the judge, "Does it ever get easier?" The judge chuckled. "No. But it gets clearer. Justice is never easy. But if it were easy, it wouldn't matter." By August, something had shifted inside Eli. He wasn't just learning, he was changing. He wasn't just watching justice in action. He was beginning to understand its heart. On the final day of the internship, the judge called Eli into his chambers. Daniel and Marisol were there too, dressed nicely and looking proud. The judge handed Eli a small box. "For you," he said. Eli opened it carefully. Inside was a miniature wooden gavel, polished, weighty, and engraved with a small plaque. "To Eli Navarro, future leader. Never forget why you started." Eli's breath caught. Tears pooled instantly. "Your Honor, I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," the judge replied. "Just promise me you'll keep this with you. Wherever you go, whatever you become." Daniel placed a hand on Eli's back. Marisol wiped a tear. Eli nodded fiercely. "I promise." "And promise me something else," the judge added softly. "Promise me you'll keep choosing truth, even when it's hard, even when it hurts. Because the world needs people like you," Eli whispered. "I promise, Your Honor." The judge smiled. "Good. Then I think we're done here, for now." But as Eli stepped out of the chambers holding the gavel, clutching it tight to his chest, he knew their story wasn't over, not by a long shot, because this wasn't just the end of a summer. It was the beginning of a calling, a spark, a future he had never imagined, but one that fit him perfectly. And long after the gavel was placed on his nightstand, and the internship ended, Eli would continue to carry the lessons of that summer into every part of his growing life. Lessons about honesty, about justice, about compassion, about the kind of person he wanted to become. And someday, many years later, when a young man named Eli Navarro stood inside a courtroom wearing a black robe of his own, he would remember this moment, this judge, this summer, this beginning, and he would carry the legacy forward, just as Judge Frank Caprio always knew he would. In the end, Eli's story isn't just about a dismissed ticket or a generous judge. It's about the power of truth, the weight of love, and the courage it takes to share burdens instead of hiding them. His journey reminds us that even the smallest acts of honesty can ripple into life-changing opportunities, and that compassion, when paired with accountability, can transform futures. We all carry struggles, fears, and mistakes, but we don't have to carry them alone. When we choose truth over secrecy and kindness over judgment, we become part of each other's healing. What about you? What lesson from Eli's story resonates most with your own life? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss another story of justice, compassion, and humanity.